Today we're answering questions about an article we read, Why More Men Will Soon Find Themselves Doing Women's Work, in the Washington Post. And the first question is, what are some examples of women's work and how is it tied to gender? Well, in the book, they were talking about care work, face-to-face caretaking of children, elderly, and all that sort of thing. So I suppose that anything in a supporting role or something that's viewed as maternal instinct kind of a thing would be what some would call women's work. Anything that's linked to femininity is what they would call women's work. So taking care of somebody, cleaning, being somebody's personal assistant, secretary, teachers, nurses, or anything that's viewed as like outer appearances need to be, being pretty and being like eye candy, I guess, would be another thing that they could, although I suppose men can do it too, but the sexual appeal is tended towards women. So those are a couple things that I view as women's work. They listed secretary, sewers, phone operators, teachers, and once upon a time, I guess computer programming was considered a woman's job, although now it's reversed and became more male-dominated. And why do the authors argue that men will likely need to change to engage in women's work in the future? Well, with economical changes and technology making manufacturing easier and more automated, there's less of a need for humans or for the men in these role types. It's making it more difficult to find jobs in those male-dominated professions that employ the less educated males, so coal miners and construction, and those sorts of roles. And like I said, with technology and the changes of how they operate and how they work and the cost benefits of outsourcing it, it's making it a little bit more difficult to find jobs for these men. So in order for them to continue to be in the workforce, they will have to adapt and figure out a way to masculinize, I guess, women's work, or what is viewed as women's work, or change the way they look at that. The reason that they said that the jobs for the men that were least educated, it went to them and it was more masculine, and it was hard work. In terms of labor, it was enough for, they made enough to be able to still be the breadwinners of the family. Whereas with the women's work, since they had, since it was only a supporting income anyway, I guess they can view that as not as important as, or needing to make as much money because they're not the breadwinners of the family. So with the male-dominated job field decreasing, they need to become more adaptable and open to taking jobs that are considered female or any kind of job, just because if they don't, they'll fall behind and not be able to thrive. And they have to make changes in their beliefs of the male-female oriented job brackets. Otherwise, they won't be able to thrive in this new environment in terms of, salary jobs. How might men be perceived by their peers if they work in a role traditionally allocated to women? Well, I feel that men sometimes have fragile egos and would be embarrassed to discuss their woman job with their buddies. Fear of being labeled as sissy or gay. They might want to just keep that hidden, or perhaps even not even take a job for fear of what people will think of them, or perhaps maybe it would look better for their masculine selves to not even have a job, if the counter to that is having a job that is considered female. So I think a lot of it has to do with just the way society projects these ideas in the heads of men and women. Or perhaps it also could be that they would feel like, the women wouldn't want them either, because then they may be less of a man because of the fact that they have a job that is more based for girls. I know that, there's stereotypes where male nurses are considered either not smart enough to be doctors, or they're gay, or, female police officers, well, they have to be lesbians. I just feel like if you decide to choose a profession in a predominantly specific, gender-specific job, so one that has either men or female, whichever, when they're masculine and feminine, if the opposite gender takes the profession, you have to give a reason as to why that's the case. And it just seems easier to say, oh, well, this is why he likes to be like a female, so that's why he took a female role, and she has to feel like she wants to be male. It can't be the fact that they just enjoy the profession or enjoy the role, or that's just what they wanted to do in their lives. So I feel that those are a couple of things that would men would feel that they were being judged by their peers, and even, for future relationships with opposite sex, if they're heterosexual and they have this female job, that maybe the women won't take them as serious as if, a guy who has a masculine job or a gender appropriate job, I guess. How might these traditionally female occupations change with the infusion of men? I'm not sure, because like the gender gap that they talk about, and so it could be that starting pay for a man and a woman in a woman role or woman job role, it could start increasing that, because then like the starting pay for a man in a female dominated role, they would start off higher, and then that can cause issues. Or it could be that the total flip of a reversal, and just like a once, like the computer programming situation, like it once was all female, and then all of a sudden, however they turned it into a masculine one. They could do that. Instead of nursing being a caregiving role that's considered female, they could turn it into, they can masculinize the role and state that, there's heavy lifting and you have to know dosage of medication, be good at chemistry, like things that you, for whatever reason, think as manly. That's how you can kind of change the the perception of the specific role as far as gender is concerned. I'm not sure. In World War II, when all the men went overseas to fight the war, and they had women like go into these roles, like women's baseball instead of male baseball, because they still wanted to see certain things. And so since the males weren't there, they allowed the females to do it. But once they came back, then they just kind of put women to the wayside. I feel like that could happen if you're, having these traditionally female occupations infused with men, like the men will overtake it. I'm specifically thinking of the movie League of Their Own when I'm thinking about the women's baseball versus the male. But it's true in history that, when they went off to war, women obviously were there, so they took all these roles that were mostly males, but when the males came back, they were expected to just give it up and go back to the way things were. So perhaps that would be another change that could take place. Although, women fight hard for the changes to stay, so I'm hoping that equality in the workplace and gender gaps and all these sort of things will, start to not be gender specific and start to gear more towards personality and education and talents and skill sets. And that's all for this week. Thank you.